Hi guys, it's Steph with you for part 2 of writing a winning HSC essay response for the HSC English Standard Examination Paper 2 Module A for Elective 2 Distinctly Visual. In video 1, we mapped out all our ideas, we rephrased the question, we chose our related text and produced mind maps that explored the textual elements and qualities that create a distinctly visual experience. We explored how these distinctly visual elements draw us into the experiences of others and create meaning in our texts. Now it's time to put all of those ideas into an essay format. Our essay is going to look like this. It will have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. The body of our essay will follow a teal structure. That is, it will have a topic sentence, an elaboration of the argument, evidence, and then linking back to the contention. The introduction of our essay will follow a lies structure. That is, it will have a link to the opening sentence of the topic. It will indicate the author and the title of the texts. It will establish a main contention and signal or signpost your arguments. And that means it basically just tells your reader where your essay is going to go. You're telling them what you're about to tell them, pretty much. The conclusion of the essay is a triple R model where you restate the contention, restate the arguments, and round off the essay. So first of all, let's look at the introduction. Now remember, we're going in a lies format here. We're going to link our opening sentence to the topic. The textual elements, forms, and features of a text create distinctly visual elements in a text. These distinctly visual elements draw the reader into the experiences of others. You can see that that directly links our essay to the question that we explored in video 1. Next, we need to indicate the author and title, and we're going to have two texts here, our prescribed text and either of our related texts. So next you'll say, this can be seen in the selected poetry of Douglas Stewart and the Aboriginal Memorial at the National Gallery of Australia by the Ramingining artists, or Samson and Delilah, directed by Warwick Thornton. You can choose either of our related texts for your essay. Obviously you won't put both of them there, you'll just put in the one that you choose. The next thing your introduction needs to do is to establish a contention. And you can see that here. The ways in which an author uses elements of language and features of film and imagery create a distinctly visual element to a text that allows the reader or audience to make individual connections to the text, both in their own subjective world and in the world created within each text. And finally, we need to signal or signpost our arguments. This essay will look at this feature in relation to the aforementioned texts and demonstrate how the perceptions and relationships with others are created and shaped through visual elements. So we now have an introduction that does all of these things. So let's read that all together. The textual elements, forms, and features of a text create distinctly visual elements in a text. These distinctly visual elements draw the reader into the experiences of others. This can be seen in the selected poetry of Douglas Stewart and the Aboriginal Memorial at the National Gallery of Australia by the Ramingining artists. The ways in which an author uses elements of language and features of film and imagery create a distinctly visual element to a text that allows the reader or audience to make individual connections to the text, both in their own subjective world and in the world created within each text. This essay will look at this feature in relation to the aforementioned texts and demonstrate how the perceptions and relationships with others are created and shaped through visual elements. So you can see that's directly answering our question. Now let's go back to these mind maps. In order to do the body of our essay, we need to start exploring these different things that we looked at in our mind maps. Now remember, we went through this mind map for Douglas Stewart, and then we looked at this mind map for Samson and Delilah, and then we looked at this mind map for the Aboriginal Memorial. And we did each of those in detail in video 1. You might choose not to represent your thoughts in a mind map structure. You might choose to represent your thoughts in point form, and that's perfectly fine. But before you write your essay, you need to somehow work out the different points that you're going to make in support of your argument, so that when you write your introduction and when you start writing your essay, you know where you're going to go with it. And you should always take a bit of time at the start of every essay question in an exam to just jot down your main ideas and how you're going to progress your argument. So then when you get to this bit, the body of the essay, you know what you're going to write. And you'll see when we work through this paragraph that the information that we use to answer that question is coming directly from here, this mind map about Douglas Stewart's poetry. We've already worked through that. So we turn that into the first paragraph of the body of our essay. First of all, we start with a topic sentence. The selected poetry of Douglas Stewart uses many literary techniques of language, form and structure to create a highly visual experience. That's our topic sentence. It tells you what that paragraph is going to be about. Next is an elaboration of our argument. The use of imagery, metaphor, analogy, personification and onomatopoeia in his poem Lady Feeding Cats work to create a visual presence for the reader. The reader feels as if they are there, witnessing the feeding of the cats. So that's basically elaborating what our argument is going to be with reference to Douglas Stewart's poetry in this paragraph. And you can recognise there, where we're talking about use of imagery, metaphor, etc., that has come directly out of our mind map, where we looked at the literary forms and features. Next, we need to look at some evidence of that. Imagery is used throughout the poem to create a picture of the environment and the characters involved. The lady is described as a blue-eyed lady showing the weather's stain, which brings an instant image of an elderly lady with deep blue eyes. Metaphor and analogy are used to explain what is happening, with the cats marching like an army. Proudly they step to meet her. They march together. Onomatopoeia is used to create feelings of presence, with the cat's courtship being a hiss, a howl, and a blow. So you can see what we've done there is provided some evidence to support our argument. Next, we need to link back to our main contention. All these elements come together to form a picture of what is happening in this scene. The reader feels as if they are there on the spot and as if they know the lady and the cats. It is through the use of these visual elements that Stewart guides the reader to develop a relationship with the characters in the text, and ultimately, at the end of the poem, with the statement, "She smiles and walks back lightly to the slums," to reflect on their own lives in comparison to the lady in the poem. So you can see there in the first paragraph to the body of our essay, we've followed our teal structure, and we've also used the ideas that we mind mapped to incorporate into those paragraphs. So that's why you need to do a mind map or a set of dot points first. Then when you come to write your paragraphs in your essay, you'll have the information all there next to you, and all you have to do is work the information into this structure. Now we repeat this process. So we're going to use that teal structure, and we're going to repeat it to thoroughly flesh out all the paragraphs we've outlined on our mind maps. So you may do this for the prescribed text and one of the related texts in this essay. However, I think it would be worthwhile writing paragraphs for the other related text as well, in case your actual exam question lends itself better to one or the other. Once you've fleshed out the body of your essay by following that teal structure over and over and covered off all of those points from the mind maps, you get to the part where you have to write a conclusion. We're following a triple R model for this, where we're going to restate the contention, restate the arguments, and round off the essay. So let's restate the contention. This essay has shown, through the study of the selected poetry of Douglas Stewart and the Aboriginal Memorial by the Ramingining artists, that distinctly visual elements created through the use of textual forms and features can draw a reader into the experiences of others. Douglas Stewart uses various forms and features of language in his poetry to create a vivid feeling of being directly involved with the story, which shapes the reader's perceptions and creates relationships with the subjects. The Aboriginal Memorial uses layers of symbolism, imagery and representation to tell deeply layered narratives that are engaging and create a depth of understanding because of the highly emotive visual design of the installation work. So you can see there we've restated the contention, then we've gone on to restate the arguments and also mentioned the texts again so that we're summing up each text. Now, if you chose to do Samson and Delilah as your related text, obviously you would put that in here and you would put that in here. Because we've chosen the Aboriginal Memorial for this example, we've used that. The final part, rounding off the essay, is something that a lot of people find quite tricky. Basically, I've just tried to summarise the main ideas of what we've said. So it's almost like a rewrite of the first line of the essay, pretty much, with a little bit more information in it. Various texts use distinctly visual elements to create connection, shape perceptions, and create relationships with their texts. This is done through literary techniques, language forms and structures, and also through tapping into the subjective elements that each reader or viewer brings to the text itself. I think that last part of the essay people often struggle with, and it's mainly because it's being made to seem more complicated than it is. It really is just a final sentence to sum up everything that you've just said. Okay, so now it's your turn. To practice for your HSC would be great if you could complete this essay. Use the introduction, first paragraph and conclusion we've just worked through together as a guide. Follow your teal structure. Use those mind maps that we created to flesh out the paragraphs for your essay. The information is all there. We've run through it together. You just need to take it and put it into a teal structure. Try to practice paragraphs for both related texts, just so you can get used to breaking the material down into an essay-style format before your HSC. You might think that you can do it and it seems really easy, but it would be really awful if you got into the HSC, sat down to write that paragraph and realised that you actually have had no practice at putting those words together in those ways. Practice at assembling those sentences into a teal structure is what makes it flow better, and the more you practice with the teal structure, the easier it will become. So happy practicing with that, and I'll see you next time.